Welcome to Midnight Mysteries. If you feel like listening to a horror story, you're in the right place. Like all haunted house stories, this took place right after I moved in. Cliché, right? My wife and I saved up enough money from our rental to finally put down on a house of our own. So we moved in and everything seemed right at first. It wasn't until later that I realized there were warning signs. The seller seemed really anxious to close, and we were offered a much cheaper price than we expected for the space we got. While there was a moment of doubt, we brushed it off as some weird circumstance that ended in a great deal for us. How could we possibly pass that up? The strange occurrences were small at first. I would be up late watching TV and swore I heard something. I'd pause the show and make out what sounded like dragging noises. After investigating, I wouldn't find anything. Even stranger was that no matter where I walked in the house, the noise always sounded the same distance away. When I focused on it, I noticed the particular noise was rhythmic. Tap, tap, sleepy-eyed. It was like that every single time. My wife never heard it. It was only me. None of us believe in ghosts, mind you. But as I said before, it was a small thing, so I brushed it off. One night, I woke up in a startle. I listened intently, but could hear nothing. I decided to grab a late-night snack from the kitchen since I was awake anyway. Halfway down the hall, I heard something. This time, it sounded like dirt being sifted. I knelt down and swore that the sound was louder. Before I knew it, I had my ear pressed to the hardwood floor, listening intently. SCHHD, SCHHD, SCCCHHHHHHH. I jumped up from the floor. It was that same pattern of noises, but this time it sounded like someone in the dirt, trying to ignore the chills washing over me. I took a step towards the kitchen when something grabbed my ankle. I fell forward, almost busting my chin on the floor. What the? Flipping over, I turned to face my assailant, but there was no one behind me. I brushed it off and chalked it up to poor balance from a sleep hangover. My wife got a good chuckle out of that one. After that, the house began to feel heavier. It was this weight over me that would come and go. This was accompanied by feeling cold no matter how much we turned up the heat, and this was the middle of the summer. Even stranger, the cold seemed to only be in certain spots, particularly on the floor itself. I like to walk around barefoot no matter what time of year it was, but it was even too cold for me. Another night, I woke up again. My ears stood at attention, but couldn't hear any evidence of what woke me up. I got up just like before, except I never made it to the kitchen. I only made it halfway down our hall before I suddenly felt a horrible pain in my right leg. I had to limp to keep moving, then my other leg was racked with a wave of pain. It was so bad I found myself face down on the ground, writhing in agony. Then I heard it again, that awful succession of noises. Tap, tap, sleed. The sliding sound was coming from the hardwood floor this time, not from underneath, and the sound was getting closer and closer until asterisk. I watched in horror as a hand came around the corner in front of me. It was soon joined by another, and they tugged at the floor. My heart hammered in my chest as a person slowly came into view. It was a woman with long black hair, her disheveled clothing smeared with dirt and hanging off in shreds. Her mouth was crudely stitched shut. She looked up at me with empty, lost eyes, and I instantly felt a lifetime of pain and misery. It took my breath away, and I had to focus on my breathing to keep myself from fainting. Tap, tap, sleed. That awful sound repeated as she grabbed the floor and pulled herself towards me. I was in a terrified trance, eyes locked with her as she slowly closed the distance. I could now see that she dragged herself because her legs were horribly mangled. A low moan emanated from her throat, sending ice through my veins. Her very presence seemed to drain me, and I couldn't move no matter how hard I tried. She made this awful gurgling sound as she got within arm's reach. In seconds, her face was right up to mine. I tried to scream, but couldn't make any sound. Then, I woke up. H. I shouted as I sprang up in bed. My wife tried to console me, but it did very little. I'd never had a dream that felt so real before. Shaking, I walked out into the hallway where I had collapsed in my dream. I put a hand on the floor, expecting it to be freezing cold as usual, but it was warm. Honey, I felt the soft hand of my wife touch my shoulder. What's going on? You look white as a sheet. I'm okay. On the floor in front me, I noticed the faint trace of fingernail marks. Was that there before? My wife inquired. I'm not sure. Let's go back to bed. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. I tried to hold back my stubborn expression, but she still saw it. Come on, you need to rest. With an exasperated exhale, I went back to bed with the strange occurrence replaying incessantly in my brain. In the morning, I told my wife about all the strange experiences. To my shock, she actually believed me. What do you want to do then? She asked. Well, I have a theory I want to check out. Theory of what? Well, let's just say that ghosts exist, and there are certain reasons why they haunt certain places. If that is true, then I think there could be a body in our crawl space. What, are you crazy? I know how it sounds, but what would it hurt to look? You really think there's something down there? More someone, but I'm not sure, to be honest. Hopefully I can get a confirmation either way it goes. That afternoon, I found myself standing at the door to our crawl space. It felt ridiculous, but so many details pointed to it. The sounds and cold spots were all related to the floor. The ghastly woman's clothes were smeared with dirt. It was obscure, but it was all I had to go on. I had to pry the door open with a crowbar, but I managed after a minute or two. A wave of unnatural cold air blasted me, so strong that I had to throw on a coat just to stop from shivering so badly. I clicked on my flashlight, illuminating the eerie underbelly of our home. The dirt sifted under my feet as I crouch-walked around. After hearing it, it only confirmed what I thought I heard from under the floor. Expecting to see more, I was almost disappointed that the crawl space was completely bare. Not believing it entirely, I shined my light around more. The back part of the crawl space led to concrete, and it was there that I noticed one section of the wall looked different than the rest. Hands quivering, I pushed against the section of concrete and felt it shift under the pressure. It continued to wobble around in place the more I pushed. Holding my flashlight between my teeth, I had to use both hands to pry the piece away from the wall. To my astonishment, it pulled away very easily. It was no coincidence that the section of wall fit the hole exactly, like a puzzle piece. After leaning the piece of concrete against the wall, I found that the concrete was covering a door with a padlock. There's no way anything good is behind this. Minutes later, I returned to the mysterious door with a pair of bolt cutters. I debated whether or not I'd go in. There was no reason I shouldn't satisfy my curiosity, because if there wasn't anything, then great, but if there was something terrible, I'd simply have to deal with it. Either way, I had to know. I clipped the metal bar off the lock, and it thudded softly to the dirt floor. Taking in a deep breath, I dared to aim my beam down the opening. The crawl space extended much further into the house, and I had a good guess where it led. I now had to crawl on my hands and knees as a knot of dread formed in my stomach. You always tell people not to do this in movies. Why are you doing this now? I chastised myself. I knew all too well how stupid this was, but the part of my brain that can't look away from a car wreck pushed me to carry along regardless. It was difficult to navigate with the flashlight and crawl. A mild claustrophobia settled in that pushed me along with a sense of urgency. The temperature couldn't have been any more than a meat locker. My hands shook despite my thick jacket. Eventually, I came to a dead end. Is this all? I stopped for a moment and checked around with my light some more, hoping a more thorough search would bear some fruit. Yet, there was nothing. Sighing in frustration, I decided that perhaps I was losing my mind and was just having really vivid dreams after all. How could I have been so stupid? I made it halfway across the hidden area when I felt my legs suddenly give out. They weren't tired or sore before this. It was as if they stopped working of their own volition. I attempted to cry out, but my mouth felt as if some force held it closed. Just like a stitched mouth. One of the few things I could move was my neck, and I turned to the side to see a tuft of a blanket. Due to the narrow space, I must have missed it. I slowly reached for it with all the internal alarms in my body going off at once. Ignoring the warning, I pulled the cloth back to reveal a skeletal hand. In this moment of revulsion, something turned on my motor skills again as I regained control of my legs, crawling out of there as quickly as I could muster. Heaving, I stumbled out of the crawl space and instantly felt the rise in temperature. I sat on the porch and stayed there as I called the police and explained the situation. It turns out that one of the previous owners of the home was a major suspect in the disappearance of a young lady 15 years ago. There wasn't enough evidence to conduct a home search, so they were never able to find the body. And what they found was something I wish I had never known. From examining the body, they found that her captor had broken both of her legs so she couldn't escape and sewn her mouth shut to keep her from screaming. It was hard to tell how long she'd been locked down there before she died, but they hypothesized it was a month or two. The cause of death was unclear. This was clearly enough to pursue the former owner. When they picked him up, the guy tried to play the ignorance card, pretending as if he didn't know what house they were referring to. This, of course, made it even more suspicious. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything concrete enough to tie him to her death until they searched his current home. Blueprints of the home show that the crawl space was supposed to end 10 feet where the concrete wall was. No contractors were hired to do any work on the home, so someone had personally busted it up and created the door going further in. The last part of it was the padlock on the door. When the police searched the man's home, they found a shoebox full of seemingly innocent keepsakes. Among the keepsakes were some heirlooms, pictures of close family members, and a key. As suspected, the key matched the padlock to the crawlspace door. It was apparently enough to make him crack. It wasn't long before he confessed to the kidnapping and murder, albeit without a hint of remorse. Turns out the bastard kept the key as a sick trophy. They even questioned him about other possible victims, since this was a trait commonly shared by serial killers. He denied it, but the police couldn't feel any truth from it. If anything, they knew that they solved one case, put a guilty man behind bars, and put a family at peace. Justice was served, and he was locked away for the rest of his miserable life. Poetic justice, if you ask me. The poor girl's parents buried her remains on a family plot. After all this, we had serious doubts about staying in the home. Knowing something this egregious happened in our home was almost unbearable. I can't tell you how much we cried when we heard the story of what happened to that poor girl. We were on the brink of selling the house for about a week, but one night changed all that. I woke up from a dream. One so vivid, yet it somehow escaped my thoughts like a fistful of sand. There was a strange feeling in my gut, as if something was going to happen. It was neither good nor bad, just strange. After drinking a small glass of milk, I meandered down the hall and stopped in my tracks. A woman stood in front of me, half transparent with a bluish luminescence. I felt as if I knew her, although I didn't recognize her appearance at all. She smiled, and I instantly knew who she was. Compared to her previous horrific manifestation, the woman was almost unrecognizable. Never speaking, she motioned to her legs, and I saw that they were in perfect condition. In a mild state of shock, I managed to form a smile. She beamed even wider and ran her fingers across her lips, pointing out her lack of stitches. A blanket of warmth wrapped around me, and I couldn't resist the salty tears that streamed down my face. Right before she waved goodbye, a voice spoke within my mind. "It's over now. Thank you." She faded away, and for the first time since we moved into that house, all hints of the oppressive energy dissipated. That was the last time I ever saw her. It's been 30 years now, and we're still in that house to this day. May she continue to rest in peace.